If I look tired, I apologize. I've been up since 6:30 this morning, so I have made a pot of tea. Believe it or not, this is my first cup of tea of the day, and this is a book haul. I realized that over the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've purchased a lot of books, most of them used, and I haven't really done a proper book haul. So this is what that is. I'm going to start just with a random stack. I don't remember which order I bought these in, but I've discovered that the Salvation Army and the Vincent de Paul thrift store, which are just around the corner from me, have very cheap books. Salvation Army does 5 books for $4. The Vincent de Paul has a rack with 4 books for $1. So I picked up this Penguin edition of Wuthering Heights. I read this book 4 years ago, maybe. I don't have a copy anymore, so I figured I might as well pick it up. I have a thing for these vintage penguins. Also in a vintage penguin edition, I found something called Saint Joan by Bernard Shaw, and I guess this is a play about Joan of Arc. I had never heard of it, but a nice penguin edition, good smell, it appealed to me. And then the Salvation Army had, I don't know, maybe 100 Agatha Christie's about 3 weeks ago, and I've gone in 2 or 3 trips and picked up a few each time. And a lot of them are these great little vintage Dell editions or pocketbook editions. So here is Murder in Retrospect, a Hercule Poirot mystery. And then There Were None, in a pocketbook edition. It's got a cute kangaroo on the back there. An Overdose of Death, original title, The Patriotic Murders. And N or M, in Adele edition. And then this is a book that I picked up kind of on a whim. I think I grabbed it because I had 4 I wanted, and I wanted to make even 5 so I could get the deal, because otherwise they were 99 cents each. So this is called No Highway by Nevil Shute. It says it's a novel of terrifying urgency by the best-selling author of On the Beach. An aviation engineer himself, Nevil Shute writes about the development of a gigantic new British airliner and the agonizing decision of one man, an obscure research scientist who predicts that a vital part of the plane will fail in flight. So it sounds pretty exciting. Let me just check the publication date for you. 1948 originally. And I'm wondering if it's sort of a thriller or perhaps a disaster novel of sorts. We'll see. Then I picked up a copy of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume, which was a childhood favorite of mine. I read it a number of times in middle school. So I picked this up at the Chapters for about $8 and reread it and enjoyed it just as much the 4th or 5th time around, I guess. Then I have something that I had ordered online maybe 2 months ago, and it finally came a couple weeks ago. And it's Women's Barracks by Teresca Torres, the original 1950 tale of life and love in the Free French Army. So this is supposedly the first lesbian pulp fiction novel. It predates the works of Anne Bannon, and I'm excited to read it. I should actually finally read it. I actually forgot that it had arrived because I was reading other stuff. And when I was in the Chapters, they had the Chapters at Rideau Center. They had a lot of classics, and I believe it was 3 for $10 or something like that. And they're decent editions. They're not ugly editions, if you know what I mean. So I picked up To Have and Have Not by Ernest Hemingway in this great edition. And I also picked up The Great Gatsby, which I reread by F. Scott Fitzgerald, of course. and I still don't really like the novel all that much. It's not as bad as I thought the first time, but I don't know, it's just not my type of novel, I guess. I wanted to try some other Fitzgerald, so I also picked up Tender as the Night. Great little cover here. And I've been wanting to reread Dracula, and my edition is at my parents' place, and it's an illustrated edition with pictures from the 1931 film with Bela Lugosi, and the text is laid out in a kind of a periodical format as opposed to in a novel format, so it's a little bit difficult to read. It's very large, but this is a great edition, and I'm going to reread this sometime in the near future. And this is what originally drew me to the table of these cheap books. It was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which was a mandatory reading when I was in high school, grade 11 English. And I've been wanting to reread it ever since, and this is just a gorgeous edition. I'm a big fan of purple on book covers. Yeah, so there's that. And I also ended up with The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. I'm still trying to break in and read William Faulkner. I just can't seem to get into him. I tried Sanctuary, I tried As I Lay Dying. We'll see how this one goes. And then I have some more Agatha Christie here. This is one I'm actually reading right now. It is The Labours of Hercules, The Legend of Poirot's Retirement. This is a Fontana Books edition from 1961. I really love these vintage Agatha Christie paperbacks. Then I have one that I finished reading the other day. It's The Moving Finger. I showed this in my Friday Reads video. And one that I also read, The Body in the Library, a Miss Marple mystery. Then I was excited to find this next one. It's a copy of Airport by Arthur Haley. Dust Jacket isn't here, but this is one that I remember reading 5 years back maybe. And it's kind of an airport disaster type of book. Really exciting. It was made into a movie in the 70s, I believe. And I got rid of my paperback long ago, but I saw this and I got the urge to reread it, so I picked it up. It was only $1. And then my mom used to read, and still does, a lot of Victoria Holt. And I read a couple of Victoria Holts when I was a teenager. And when I came across Manfreya in the Morning, in this double-day edition with this beautiful vintage dust jacket, I decided maybe I'd dig into some Victoria Holt again. And moving on, because I've still got a bunch. Wait for Marcy by Rosamond Dujardin. I wish I could tell you what it was about, but the back is all torn up, really. It appears to be some sort of teenage romance type thing about a girl whose popular older brother Ken has dozens of handsome friends, and it's a perfect way for a girl to meet boys. But she's seen as a tag-along little sister. And it just intrigued me because it's something I'd never heard of, and it's in this nice little compact edition, and it's got a very interesting cover to it. And it's fairly old. It was published in 1971, this edition, but the original copyright is from 1932. Then I have a hardcover here, and I'm kind of disappointed because there was a giant sticker on the end, and when I tried to remove it just a little bit, it took up a whole bunch of the spine, and at that point there was no point just leaving it on there because it was hacking me off, so I took it off all the way and took off some of the paper from the spine. But this is Royce of the Royal Mounties by Amos Moore. I know nothing about this book, but well, I thought it was interesting because there is a toothpaste commercial on the back. The toothpaste that refreshes, Euthymol, kills dental decay germs in 30 seconds. And it appears to be a children's book published in London, 1934. And I'm assuming that it is set in Canada based on the Royal Mounted, perhaps about someone who is in the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Should be interesting. And another random grab, 500 Keys by Michael Carn. Richard Caplan had never been involved in anything like it before. It started as a simple gesture, an investment with a quick, substantial return. Sure, it was illegal, but that added to the excitement, the thrill of being a small part of a transatlantic smuggling scheme run by the charismatic madman, or the genius, who would become a legend of the student revolution. But then Caplan found himself in Casablanca, boarding the 38-foot Newfoundland longliner that would carry the precious cargo on the first treacherous leg of his journey to the streets of Montreal. And it was more than he or anyone would have ever willingly bargained for. Nelson paperbacks printed in Canada. It's a mystery novel, and I don't know, the back intrigued me, so I picked it up. Then I have a Michener novel. I read a couple of Micheners 5 or 6 years ago, and this one is The Drifters, the famous bestseller by the author of Chesapeake. And it appears to be about a group of young people, 6 young runaways adrift in a world they have created out of dreams, drug, and dedication to pleasure. Set in Spain and Mozambique. Should be interesting. And then I have WLT, a radio romance by Garrison Keillor. Radio, WLT, with lettuce and tomato, is the friendly neighbor station in Minnesota, founded in 1926 to promote its founder's sandwich bar and the home of a heartwarming selection of programs, including Adventures in Homemaking, presented by a scantily clad Luella Wells, and the Intimidable Friendly Neighbor, starring chain-smoking child star Little Becky. Young Francis, with a faithful listener from North Dakota, identifies with the radio family and its sorrows and adventures. Through his Uncle Art, he gets a job at WLT and begins his ascent to the pinnacle, the exalted position of staff announcer. But then comes television. It sounds like kind of an entertaining comedic book. Once again, picked up on a whim. And then I also picked up a copy of a book that I had heard of, but have never even considered reading. It was one that I added on to get the 4 for $1, and it is The God Machine by Martin Caidin. Deep in a hollowed-out peak of the Rocky Mountains is the ultimate computer, a scientific monster named Project 79. Here is the nerve-shattering story of what happens when the computer decides to destroy its human creators and to take over the world. Sounds pretty exciting, and as I said, I'd heard of this one, but I didn't really know much about it, and for $1, hard to pass up. Then I have more Agatha Christie. I really should have stacked all these Agatha Christie together and been more prepared, but I have a Dell Mystery edition of Murder in Retrospect. It says there is a map on the back cover, and lo and behold, there is. The interesting thing about these Agatha Christie's is that you can tell they were part of someone's collection because they all have these little pieces of paper inside that has the copyright date on it, the title, and then each one of them has a photocopy of the cover, as though perhaps yeah, and this, I'm not sure why it's photocopied. I was thinking, well, maybe they had this first and they were looking for the cover, but I can tell that it's the exact photocopy of this book once they picked it up, because you got the same damage on the cover showing up on the photocopies. So someone had an interesting collection of these. Then we have Partners in Crime. And the Tuesday Club Murders, once again in one of these little pocket editions, another Dell edition, another photocopy cover, and this one just has a sticky note with a date. 1928, 1963. And then we have Towards Zero. This is actually an edition that was published in Canada, which is perhaps why it looks unlike any of these other ones here. And then we have Sad Cypress, another pocket edition here. This one is also a Dell. And that, one more Agatha Christie. The Secret of Chimneys, and this is in a Great Pan edition. Pan Books from London. This is a publisher I'm not familiar with. Once again, photocopy, little piece of paper with the date. This is the 7th printing, apparently. Yeah, this is from 1961. And then I have Agatha Christie in hardcover here. Passenger to Frankfurt from 1970. Piece of paper giving me the date. This one does not have a photocopy of the cover. I was drawn to this one by the purple dust jacket, which is in pretty good condition. And then I just have a couple more that I picked up on a whim. We have a Scribner edition of Fitzgerald's Babylon Revisited and Other Stories. I do like these Scribner editions. I have some Hemingway in these editions. A little bit of water damage, but it's got a nice smell to it. Then I have one that's in a New Canadian Library edition by an author I'd never heard of, but I do like my Canlit. This is Man Descending. Man Descending is Guy's superb first book of fiction in its 12 stories with settings that range from a Canadian prairie farm to the London neighbourhood of Bloomsbury. Guy captures brilliantly and with compassion the terrors and joys of life, revealing the complexities of the world through the eyes of an 11-year-old boy or in the ruminations of an old man nearing death, sometimes rollicking with laughter, other times deeply sinister and foreboding. The stories together make a vibrant assessment of the human condition. Man Descending won the Governor General's Award for Fiction in 1982. Yeah, so this appears to be a collection of short stories. And even though the spine is quite tight yet, I can tell it's been read because someone has been making some notes in here. I'm assuming it was probably perhaps for a class. Well, that's interesting. Someone circled the phrase bruised fruit. So there's that. Then I have something that made me laugh to look at. I can only imagine how books like this inspired the modern medical dramas, but we have The Interns, now a sensational movie, a Columbia picture, by Richard Freed. The smash bestseller about the making of a doctor. Shocking, sharply revealing. The Interns. Here are the interns. They work too hard, see too much, live too fast. In one brief year, they learn the elemental, shocking facts of life and death and sex. And then it goes on to talk about the actors in the movie. And just looking at the pictures back here, which I assume are from the movie, it makes me want to find a copy of the movie and watch it. I think I might need some tape to keep this spine from completely breaking away, but that sounds like a fun one. And then I have something called Go Down Dead by Shane Stevens. A powerful, terrifying novel of life and death in a ghetto jungle. The time, now, the place, here, the mood, bitter despair, murderous hatred. The characters, the playboys, the tigers, 2 teenage gangs armed with blades, chains, pipes, zip guns, sticks of dynamite, hell-bent for a rumble. A savage commentary on the poverty, hopelessness, sexual promiscuity, race, hatred, prostitution, violence, torture, perversion, addiction, and death which surround the ghetto child from his cradle. A shocking, bitter, horrifying book which is at once an effective protest and effective art. And this is from 1966 originally. This is the first pocketbook edition, printing in May of 68. So we'll see what this is about. It sounded sounded somewhat exciting. Gang warfare and whatnot. Yeah, we'll see if it's any good. I had never heard of it before, picked it up on a whim, as I said I did with a lot of these books. And now, one more thing before I end this video. I found a new teapot. And I'll get my tea bag string out of the way. But as you can see, it says there is always time for tea. And this was $3.50 at the thrift store when I was buying some books. So that is my book haul.